Hi, welcome to Cloud Cover. I'm Steve Marks.
And I'm Brent Steinman.
He is not Wade.
No.
Wade, unfortunately, had to take some time off to take care of his new kid and family and what I don't know, some BS excuse. So he's not here for the show today.
All I know is next time, don't leave the hacksaw close to his desk.
Yeah, that's we've learned a lesson from this, and it's that. But we're lucky to have Brent. Instead, Brent, you haven't been on the show before. You've been on Channel 9 before.
Have we broadcast that yet?
Or we haven't put it on yet.
I've been recorded. There we go.
We told Brent he was going to be on Channel 9.
Then the censors deemed it was not going to scare small children and animals, so they decided not to broadcast it.
The FCC had to come in. We got fined, actually. Even though it never aired, we got fined for your interview. But Brent, you are an MVP, a Windows Azure MVP, and you work at some company, I believe?
I am a managing consultant with Sogeti USA. We're a 3,000-person consultancy firm that operates here in North America, predominantly in the United States. We've got sister companies in other countries. So
brother companies or just sister companies?
Just sister companies.
Okay.
Yep.
That's good to know.
But here in the U.S., I help lead up our Windows Azure efforts, making sure the salespeople know what they're selling, making sure we've got enough consultants to actually deliver all these wonderful Windows Azure projects.
Good. Look, I like the way you talk about Windows Azure. And you're here this week because there's like an SDR, a strategic strategy design.
Or a software design review, I think is what it's been called.
SDR, it stands for something. Senior doctor.
There you go.
SDR.
In residence, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so you're here for that, learning all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, we're meeting with some of the members of the product team. They're showing us all this really new, cool stuff that's coming. Yesterday there was this feature that's really incredible, and I'd really like to talk about it, but we can't because
Yeah. No, we can't talk. We definitely can't say anything about the
So I can't talk about
No.
Oh. What about the
well, no, we can't talk about that either.
So we should probably talk about something.
We're going to have to bleep all that out. Just note to editor, bleep all the stuff that he said about the
Am I going to get in trouble?
Yeah, probably.
Uh-oh. Well, I better make this quick before we're escorted out then.
Okay, so let's talk about some stuff that we can talk about. Yes. Eventually, we're going to be talking about, our main feature for this week is we're going to be talking about some new stuff in Service Bus, like topics and queues. But before we get there, we're going to do some news. We're going to wrap up with our tip of the week. You guys know the drill. So what do we got in the news?
The first thing I found is Neil McKenzie, who's another one of the Azure MVPs, did a really nice write-up on a product called Azure Watch. It's an auto-scaling application for, of course, Windows Azure. Small ISV, getting going. It's been getting a lot of good press. I won't get into the full details. Neil does a really good job on his connective.wordpress.com. So go out and check that one out.
Quite detailed there, but right, the basic idea, monitoring, auto-elastic scale, that's what Azure Watch does. This is sort of a review of, how does it work, what does it do, whatever, from Neil, who I trust to give a very good sort of description of that. So, good, check that out.
Yep. And then one of the big announcements from the Azure team, of course, they've got the new API features.
Yes, this was great. We announced them. We said they can do all sorts of cool stuff. We gave a link to the documentation, and as far as I know, the documentation has not yet been updated. So we basically said, hey, there's a new API that will let you create a storage account programmatically, and here's one of the headers you'll need, but we won't tell you the shape of the API or anything. So documentation is slightly lagging. I'm sure, actually, by the time you're watching this video, I bet that the documentation will have been updated.
Cross your fingers.
Yeah. Or we'll just edit out the sentence I just said at the last minute. So either way, I'm right. If you heard me say, no, that's not true, because we're not recording. Anyway, check the documentation. It probably has new APIs for creating storage accounts. This is something people have been asking for a while. Creating storage accounts, deleting storage accounts. And there's some new details when you get information about a deployment. You get more details about the individual VMs and what's going on. So good sort of point release of some service management stuff.
Yep. And just yesterday, in fact, we had the big announcement that Fujitsu, come August, is actually going to be hosting Windows Azure applications via the long-awaited Windows Azure appliance.
Long-awaited? Yeah. I guess that's fair. Right, so they're the first one of the, remember there were like 4 of our sort of early partners and whatever. All of them have been progressing and things have been going really well. Fujitsu is the first one who's going to actually have like a commercial available. Basically, they're a provider of the Windows Azure platform because they've deployed the appliance to their data centers. They're going to just turn around and make that a service to their customers. It's very exciting. They've been a fantastic partner and continue to be, and that's coming August, right? So August
in Japan,
August 2011.
Yep.
You can go to Japan and sign up for Windows Azure Fujitsu, whatever it's going to be called.
I don't think they'll let me in.
And do it. They won't let you in Japan. No. Not after that stuff you said on that interview we did.
No. All right.
The goal of this show is to see how much trouble we can get you in, and so that's what we're going to do.
Yep, it's all Wade's fault. All right.
Yeah, it's definitely Wade's fault.
This one's a bit of a shout out to some of my colleagues over in Europe. Startup Task Runner is a CodePlex project somebody's put together. It allows you, instead of having to put all your startup tasks actually as startup tasks, you can reference them via a config file entry. So it gives you a nice, easy way to create something that's a little easier, a little more intuitive maybe to use.
Right.
Startup tasks are still great. This is just another alternative that can work good in some different situations. So
this sort of thing is useful. I find myself writing more and more startup tasks, and I shipped some code that we're not going to talk about here, but I shipped some code called a Smart Swirl this week, and when I did when I counted lines of code, more than a third of the code that I shipped was in batch files. Right? And so it's getting to that point where like the startup task to set everything up and whatever are actually becoming a significant part of the code that I'm authoring and whatever. So something like this that helps make those things a little more manageable and sort of config based is definitely good. So it's nice to see projects like this.
Yep. Oops. Can't remember why I got that one up.
Oh, it's the pricing calculator.
Oh, yes, the pricing calculator. This is the new pricing calculator.
What do you have to accept there? That was kind of scary.
It's just a terms of service saying this is all an estimate.
Yeah, even if it tells you...
Don't hold us liable for this if we tell you it's only going to cost 10 cents a day.
Okay, and that's what it does. Whatever you put in here, it just says 10 cents a day.
Yeah, it's really nice. We got all kinds of cool sliders that let you just adjust what you think you need.
Yep.
You know, play with things a little bit and come up with just a rough ballpark of estimates. You can convert, you know, the amount of currency or the type of currency you're using for things. So it's nice.
Cool.
It's simple. It's really great if you just want a quick ballpark of what something's going to take.
For the experts, you're going to find this lacking. Like, I mean, if you understand the platform deeply and you go here and you start looking for like your access control and whatever, there's a bunch of stuff that's not even on here. And then there's a bunch of stuff where you might actually have like different controls if you really know what you're doing. This is really geared towards I'm checking out Windows Azure. I'm not sure. I just need the ballpark, like, is this cheaper than what I'm doing now? Is it more expensive? What is it going to look like? This will give you a pretty good and accurate estimate for the things that you can sort of spin the dials for. And it also makes sure to tell you, hey, like you should be using the Windows Azure Core package or offer. So it sort of it tells you the straight up sort of
So we have the subscription offers down in here that are out there that you may want to look at.
Yep. And so it's good, especially for those of you who haven't really made the plunge yet and started giving us money for Windows Azure. This would be the good time to find out how much would that be, what would it look like. So
cool.
And it will get enhanced over time, of course.
Yep. So again, back over to the other side of the ocean. Martin, another of the Azure MVPs, really big in the PHP community. I've actually used earlier versions of this SDK. If you're wanting to put PHP in Azure, you've got to check this stuff out. He's doing some excellent work around the SDK. Nothing else I'd rather use right now. It's the easiest thing in the world to push a PHP app up to Windows Azure now.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And our final one.
Yeah, well, this is really what we're going to talk about. This is sort of our transition. We planned this. We planned this like several minutes before we started recording the show.
Was it really that long ago?
It was, yeah, it was a little while. And so, yeah, because there was that we recorded some material for the editing room later. So that took a little time. So it was minutes before we actually started the show. But right, this is the announcement about the Windows Azure AppFabric CTP May and June releases, apparently. And new stuff is there, and Brent is the expert. I know nothing about any of this. I'm here to learn about what has come in these new CTPs for AppFabric. So, what's going on?
Well, the two big ones I want to talk about are the reintroduction of queues, and we also have the introduction of a new feature called topics. Okay, I say reintroduction of queues because you may recall back in the CTP days, back when it was still .NET services, there were all these nice features that were going to be in there. We had queues, we had routers, really great stuff, and almost at the 11th hour, they were pulled out, so we just had the service bus relay. Many of us have been wanting them to come back. They're finally starting to show back up again. Clemens and the team have been working really hard to get things back in, and we're finally starting to see them.
Good.
Queues, it's a queue. It's a queue dynamic. You can peek, you can lock, you can push things in, you can pull them off. There's not much else to say about queues in general, but what is different is to illustrate why would I want to use an AppFabric queue over maybe an Azure Storage queue? Because we've already got Azure Storage, why do I need something else? The end result is AppFabric is going to give you a lot richer experience, okay?
So more features.
Many more features. I've been told we're going to have near guaranteed FIFO delivery, which Azure Storage Queues does a best estimate at FIFO. The capacity models are going to be a little bit different. There's some information out there. If you go out and check out the tech ed videos, they get into capacity. They might be subject to change, so I don't want to be quoted on anything.
This is CTP stuff, so right. I mean, so take all numbers with a grain of salt, right?
Yep, definitely. There's going to be some additional things. So you remember I mentioned the routers were in the old .NET services. If you again watch some of the recent videos, you can start to see the slides they've got out there. They're talking routers and message transformations are things that are on the radar. So all this will hopefully come together in a very rich, robust experience.
Right.
You've got a new API to access queues with. In Azure Storage, we can go either the REST or use the client libraries. Well, for Azure AppFabric queues, we can even use WCF bindings now to interact with the queues, which will give us some eventing models we can now illustrate through them. And then two really big ones that are coming are transaction and session support. So we'll be able to have some support for those. It's not available through, I think I've heard you can't get to it through REST, but you can get through it at least through the client libraries, which is what we'll be talking about here a little later.
Okay. So one of the ways I always sort of characterize Windows Azure queues is that Windows Azure queues are the queues you learned about in your computer science 101 like data structures class. Like the operations are NQ and DQ. Right? And that's basically it, right? Now, it's one of these reliable distributed queues, which means that the DQ is really a DQ and delete, and so that's slightly different from this sort of computer science-y queue. But once you've gotten that, you understand what Windows Azure queues do, and everything else is just sort of minor compared to that. Well, it sounds like, from what you're saying and from what I've seen, the Windows Azure AppFabric queues are designed to be one of these like messaging systems, right? I mean, it's sort of we sometimes use the word queue for when we're talking about like MSMQ and whatever and things like that, and they're well beyond sort of what the strict data structure of a queue is, but they provide all those things for a reason because people actually want those things and they help do it. So that's sort of the way to, I think, get basically a high-level mental model of like what's the goal of Windows Azure queues? Well, it's you put something in one side and it comes out the other, right? What's the goal of the AppFabric queues? It's to support a whole range of scenarios that involve a queue but are much more sort of complex than that, and things like transactions and routing and whatever are examples of those things.
And you really hit on it with the term messaging, as we'll see when we start talking about topics in the demo here in a few minutes.
Yeah. So topics? What are those?
How about we go to the whiteboard for that?
Let's go to the whiteboard.
So again, rewind back to November of last year. We had another announcement from the AppFabric team. This time it was explicit endpoints, because there was a challenge with the service bus relay functions in that if the host wasn't up and running and you tried to connect, you had no idea if you just simply had the URL wrong or if the host literally wasn't there.
Right.
So they introduced this idea of being able to register an endpoint. With topics, we're going to bring some of those dynamics back in. We're actually going to start by registering a topic, which you can think of as an object sitting up there in the cloud, represented by a namespace within the service bus that I can now address. I'll create a sender, which of course will be pushing my message into my topic. Now at this point, we look a lot like a queue. Nothing really different. On the other side, we're going to have a subscriber, which can pull messages out of that queue. What makes this a little bit different is this subscriber really isn't the guy that's reading the messages. he's going to be getting a copy of the message from the topic. You can almost think of this as a virtual queue that resides within there. What we've really got are a set of receivers that can now connect to that subscriber to pull the messages. So in this case, if I've got 3 receivers that are all attached to the same subscriber, they'll be competing for messages, meaning if I've got 3 messages come into the queue, he gets the first one, he'll get the next one, he'll get the next one, and each one will operate on them independently. So in this case, we've still duplicated our queue model.
Right.
Where things really start to diverge is I can now create another subscriber. And each message that gets put in will be sent to both subscribers. So each of his receivers can now pick up a message. So let's say these are going to an actual working process. Maybe this is going to an audit process that I can then operate upon.
Right. So every subscriber, well, every message gets to every subscriber, and then one of the receivers, right, for every subscriber, one of the receivers gets that message.
Yep.
I don't know if that helped or it made it more confusing, but right. Okay, so another way to think about it is messages are sort of duplicated among all the subscribers.
Yep.
They're not, the receiver thing is more like a queue sort of sitting here.
The topic will literally broadcast every message to all subscribers.
Right. So that part, so if we chop off the receivers, we look like sort of a regular pub-sub kind of thing, where like I'm broadcasting messages here, everybody's getting them over here. If we chop off that side and look at subscribers and receivers, it looks kind of like a queue. Right. Okay.
Yep. The other difference here is, unlike a queue, let's say I'm putting messages into the topic. The subscriber will only start receiving messages once the subscriber's been attached. So if we put in 10 messages and then attach a subscriber, we're only going to start getting those messages for that subscriber after he attached to it. Right. They literally drop out of the topic the moment they're submitted, and there's no subscriber to pick them up.
So it's a stream of events that I might dip into or dip back out. And,
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. The other fun thing, and we'll touch on this in the demo, is each of these subscribers can have a series of rules that I attach to them that can do things like filtering them. So maybe he gets events for A and he gets events for B, and never the twain shall meet.
Right.
You can also then do some minor, I'll call it transformation, but it's really not. You can perform an action on a message, maybe changing one property over to another.
I've commonly seen this sort of pattern used, like you'll have 3 subscribers, one's getting all the A messages, one's getting all the B messages because they're going to go do some work. And there's one who's getting everything because he's logging some statistics, or he's doing, that's the audit trail or whatever.
Yep.
And so that's a handy thing about having a flexible enough rule system that it's not just, well, there's one queue for these things and one queue for these, because then it's impossible to sort of to gather all of it and whatever. So having rules like this means you can split the messages out, but you can also have somebody who subscribes to all of them, or even more complex kind of overlaps of messages.
Yep, and again, keep in mind, this is all CTP. We're still very early in it, so you might see a few quirks here and there. You might even see some things that aren't there that get added over time. I don't remember what the ETA is for this stuff being in general availability, but it is nice. I'm really happy to have these features finally coming back into the service bus.
Cool. Should we check out a demo?
Let's do a demo.
To the demo.
So here's my demo app. Kept things pretty simple. What I've got is I've got an event publisher, which is really a Windows Azure worker role. Technically 2 instances of it, so I can simulate having multiple publishers pushing messages into my subscription or into my topic. I've then got an event monitor, which is what will actually be reading those messages back out. So if I've done everything correct now, this is where we cross our fingers. And we show the compute emulator.
I'm literally crossing my fingers just for you.
Oh, I didn't hit the button yet. We'll hit the deploy button.
Yeah. Maybe we should try running it, and that would be, then it will be running.
Yep, yep. We're running the deployment, running the deployment. Okay, there we go. All right, I have 2 instances of my worker role up here and running. So if I go into these, we should be able to click on the right one. And we can, maybe you can make out down here at the bottom, we're actually starting to send messages to the topic now.
Right, so this is like sleep 5 seconds and then send a message, something like that.
Yep, but I've got both of them doing them. The messages I'm sending through will actually include the ID of the instance that is sending them. So when I pull these back out, we should be able to see which instance is doing them. So let's go ahead and start up our monitor.
And this monitor is a console app running on your machine that's subscribing.
Yep, and in this case,
which means it's going to start getting the new messages only, right? Like those old messages sort of went into the ether, and then
yep.
So we have the new
ones. You can see how I get message from instance 1, instance 0, instance 1, instance 0, kind of goes back and forth.
Right.
Remember how we said if I attach more than one receiver to a subscription, we start getting into that competing behavior? Well, let's go ahead and launch another instance of that monitor, and then we'll see the message dynamics change a little bit. This one's been getting it from both instance 1 and 0. He's now gotten it from 1. He got it from 0. Now,
right. And
we're seeing the illusion that one's getting all of them from 1. It just happens to be the order.
Yeah. But sort of the important thing is we're not seeing the same message appear on both screens right now.
Yep.
And so does that mean, so which is I'm trying to get this straight, there's a subscriber and there's a receiver. Yep. What are how many subscribers do we have, and how many
At this
receivers?
point, they're both connected to the same subscriber, which I just named my subscriber. They're just both acting as receivers.
Okay.
Because the subscriber
so we have one subscriber.
Yep, which
and
actually
two
exists in the AppFabric service bus.
Right.
We just have declared him there. The receivers are then able to connect to him.
Right, and so that's why we don't see duplication of messages. If we created a second subscriber, we'd see all the messages there too. And whatever. Okay.
Yep. And see, now when I shut it down here in a moment, we'll start seeing he'll be getting all the messages that were coming through because he's no longer competing for them anymore.
Right.
So
makes sense. Okay, I know what it does now.
All right.
So what's cool in the code? Like, so first of all, you said there are different interfaces right? There's a REST interface. There's a what are you using here?
What I'm using here is the .NET API.
Okay.
Okay, it's simple, it's easy to use. You don't want to look at my REST code, it gets ugly.
Fair enough.
All right, so I'm not going to touch on all this. We're going to try and get the code up so that we can put it in the show notes by Friday.
Yeah, so scroll down on your Zune where you've subscribed to the podcast. But go to Channel 9, actually go to this page for the show, and scroll down, and you should see a link down there by now to the full source code for this.
Yep, so I'm a big fan of regions, so I've already broken the code up.
Yep.
We're going to have to create a namespace client, which you have to do almost any time you connect to the service bus. We'll create a topic, and that just makes sure the topic has been registered. We'll then create our sender, and we'll populate a message and send it through. And we'll just real quick break this code open and kind of crawl through it in a really fast method.
Yep.
This should look pretty familiar to anybody that's done service bus work. We're going to retrieve an issuer name, and there's an issuer key that I can get to. We're going to use that to create our credentials, which we use to create the namespace client, which is going to reference our service namespace. Pretty straightforward. Then we get into the actual creating of the topic. This is the code that blew up 5 minutes ago. All right. If you look at the SDK samples that have been put out with this first push of the CTP, they're actually doing a delete on the topic and then a create, which, as I said, because the subscriptions are in the cloud associated with the topic, if you remove the topic, all the subscriptions that you've declared go away. So you don't want to do that. We're actually going to try and get the topic, and if we fail to catch it, it'll throw this big, long, ugly exception name.
Isn't this like the wrong way to do this? Shouldn't it be try namespace client.create topic? Like, always try to create it and handle the 409, right, the conflict, and just ignore it. Because if it already existed, we'd ignore it.
But if it's two, I'd still have to perform two operations in that case, because if it existed, I'd still have to go and do the get.
Why do you have to do a get?
Because that's what actually generates the event topic object that I need further down the code.
I see. So really, this should be get topic, create topic, catch. We're just missing one. We just have to try, right? We just have to sort of try catch that one. Okay, fine. There should be some pattern that's perfect for this that we should get everybody to use.
What I'd absolutely love to see is if get topic and null, that kind of a dynamic. That's my personal approach.
Instead of a try catch on the get. Okay, fine. No, I accept.
Yep. I never claimed to write pretty code. All right.
No,
so
it's
here we
actually.
Yep. So using Messaging Factory, which if you've ever done anything with brokered messages, would start to look a little familiar.
Yep.
We're going to use a message factory, which again is attached to our service bus URI and namespaces to actually go in and create a client that we can use to connect to the topic. Pretty little bit of code. And then lastly, we've got our worker role infinite loop.
Right.
And in this case, I am creating a brokered message, setting some properties on it, giving it a label, and then a couple of lines of code to actually send the message. Nothing real complicated here. Okay. The key thing to call out in this is these properties, these things I'm actually adding. remember we had discussed we had filters that we could put on subscription. Filters were look at these properties. Actions can operate on the properties as well. So it's important to go through, and this is just a hash table property bag that we can put in anything we want into it. In this case, I've got an instance ID, which I won't scroll over and get into the ugly code. They can download it, look at it, that parses the role environment to get the ID number at the end. I bet that looks for the digits at the end of that string. Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Something like that. Okay.
I can imagine that code. I think I've written it before.
Yep. I probably stole it from there when I pasted it in because I was too lazy to figure it out. Anyway, so it's just it's running through the loop, doing things pretty quick. So
that seems pretty straightforward. So what's the receiving side look like?
The receiving side is very similar, so I won't run through all the little blocks on here. We're going to do the same thing with having to create a client. We're going to make sure the topic exists, because if somebody runs the monitor and the topic isn't there,
right.
But we're going to have to create a subscription this time, which we didn't do when we created the topic when we were pushing messages in.
You want to bump up the zoom to 150% so everybody at home can see this beautiful code?
There we go. So we're going to create a subscription. This looks an awful lot like when we created the topic.
Yeah.
So not much different there.
Right, and that was the thing called my subscription or something, right? This is the actual, there's one subscription. Mm-hmm. The reason there's one is because we've just used the name, a well-known name for this.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. The quick thing to call out is we created a topic, but we add a subscription. I don't know why they're different. They just are. Took me a little while to hunt because I kept looking for like a delete subscription
or something like that, and it's not quite the same
so that may trip you up if you're looking through the documentation for things. Who knows, that may change. It's all CTP.
Okay.
We have to create a client.
Yep.
Which again looks very similar to the sender that we created. Yep. And we'll actually receive the messages. And this was a neat little bit of code that it's in the SDKs. I basically stole it from my demo. Yeah. Where we're going to do this while loop on a try-receive. The try-receive has a timeout on it. So you don't have to necessarily write an infinite loop in here. It will keep pulling messages until the timeout expires. So you might want to wrap it in a bigger loop to retry. But it was a nice little way. It'll just start pulling messages immediately. So if I were to start up our service again, leave it running, and then kill the monitor, it would automatically kick off, and I think we've actually done that. So we can probably do a really quickie little run on this and see what's happening. Cross your fingers and let's see if I'm lying or not. And you see how fast it's pulling those through? Because this is all stuff that was sitting in the subscription, waiting for a receiver to pull it, so now it's just automatically pulling it all down for us right away.
Right. So, because we never got rid of the subscription, which meant it's been sort of queuing up all these messages that whole time.
Yep, and that's where the capacity limits that in there to come in. You'll have to do things like monitor the queue depth and all the rest of that.
All right.
One quick thing, just touch on it. We won't demo it. It'll be in there if anybody wants to play with it. As you'll notice, I have this block commented out here on filtering.
Okay. So that's how you might do
You would create a rule. We would put a simple little expression. These are SQL 92, I think is what they call the type of it, where I'm saying that's that property that I set when I created the message. I'm saying I only want things where it's 1, so if I used this instead of this statement, we would end up only getting things where it was from session ID 1 or instance 1. So
very cool. Surprisingly straightforward, actually. The .NET API looks pretty good. Okay, well that takes us to my favorite time of the show, which is the introduction to the tip of the week. And I think we've got a good one. If we've got the footage, I think we have. Bob, I'm going to send you an email right after we're done here. But we have some behind the scenes footage from before we actually started the show.
Wade's never going to let me fill his place again.
I think we should put it in. So let's just Bob, do what you can with that. But here is your tip of the week. To the demo.
The code works, okay?
I mean, I don't know what it does, and I'd like to know. We need to see my reaction shots.
You don't want to see my legs after 6 months of winter in Minnesota, man. I am the very model of a modern Major General.
I am the very model of a modern Major General.
I am the very model of a modern Major General.
Well, I know the kings of England anecdote, the fights historical, from Marathon to Waterloo in order categorical.
That was lovely, I'm sure. So, tip of the week is a tip about queues, right? And basically using access control as a way, because this is one of those one of those things that people actually ask about for Windows Azure queues every once in a while. And I always say, hey, it's the computer science queue. There's an NQ and there's DQ. And
everybody wants an access control method.
But ACL's on that, or some way to sort of share access to that or whatever. And so what's the deal? Can it be done?
It can be done. I ran out of time. We didn't get to put together a demo, but Clemens has put together, he started doing this podcast thing lately, or podcast-like thing. I think he does it when he's driving in his car, so we won't mention that in case the Washington State Patrol tries to pull him over.
Yeah, that's highly illegal. Well, if with a hands-free device, it's okay.
Okay, there we go. Anyway, really nice little podcast. It's about 15 minutes long. He discusses, now that with the new queues and the AppFabric is completely bound to the access control service, you can literally go through and secure a queue without having to give your owner credentials to somebody for them to access it. You can give them their own credentials, let them use a credential that you've given permission to, and actually start having multiple queues, maybe one for each client, and they all have their own access. So go out and give this a listen. Go out and play with the new Access Control AppFabric Labs portal. Make it happen.
Cool. Well, that's it. Make it happen then. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Brent, for being on the show.
Thanks for putting up with me.
This was great. Wade, we miss you, but, you know, it's your own fault.
He needs to bring back cookies.
That's right. And so you at home can, of course, interact with the show by tweeting to @CloudCoverShow, or you can tweet to Brent at
Brent Code Monkey.
Brent Code Monkey. Okay, there's no duh. There's no okay. You got different ones for different.
I can't keep
But anyway, Brent Code Monkey. That's his official title at at his company. And we should be here. Well, I will be here next week with somebody else. I don't remember who, but I think we got somebody else lined up to be on the show next week, and we will carry forth. So until next time, thanks.